Well, I got a presentation that's going to take all evening tonight, and still we won't get quite done with it. Um, Escaville, you just came in.
Yes, sir.
You got dinner going there? I'd call halvesies with you if I were there in front of you, but can't do that at a distance.
Yeah, I apologize for me eating
You
something.
don't apologize at all. I'm sitting here eating candy, and I would share it if we were again if we were closer. How about Ryan Tompkins?
Hello, Bill.
Okay, good. And Homero Orozco. Wow, just have one person missing. That's quite good. Well, you've got your first decision tonight. Is everyone ready to take a shot at it? You don't have to worry about it being wrong, because in this class, never anything that is wrong. And we want this is a chance for you to try out some things. The big thing you want to look at when you get your answers at about 11:15 tonight is to go to that comparative competitive efforts report and see what the other guys did. All of you started at the same place, but you should be able to pick out some trends as you look at the first set of results that you've got. And in fact, that's the place you always ought to look every time, to see the lay of the competition, and then go back and look at your specific numbers, starting probably with your marketing, then moving into the necessary production, making sure you don't have too much inventory, and then finally make your financing decisions. Um, if you, I have another class after this, but at 9:30, if you run into a problem that you want to talk about, I'm available by phone. And let's see, I put out a couple of listings for you on Blackboard. There's a new, I think it's new for your class, called BSG updates. And I have in there the master schedule. And then just below that, I put in a second entry that says that in everything that we do, that is the one fixed point in the universe. And that's going to drive who makes their presentations on the various uh, Harvard Business Review articles. And I'm trying to keep that pretty much as on our on our class schedule as much as I can, following the schedule that I've set out for the game. That's the big thing that I can't get back. If we make a mistake on it, I can't roll back things. Otherwise, I know we will sometimes get a little bit ahead of schedule, but more likely fall behind as I try to teach you more and more stuff. Uh, I put out of the 4 lectures I had, this is Tuesday, the 4 lectures I had last Thursday, I was only able to get one that I really thought was good. And I put that out so all you could all get to that one. And it's under the Zoom lectures, and it's put out as a YouTube. Okay. All right. Let's see. It says that we've got a second page here. Let's see who else we have. Well, the only person I'd be looking for would be Homero. Okay. I'm ready to go ahead with the lecture. You all ready? Nothing else that you want to talk about? When we get into this lecture, actually, I've gone ahead to give you, and I will tonight, give you some stuff that is not part of the Mgmt book. We've kind of jumped ahead and get into already some strategy setting without really understanding that much about it. But that was what's necessary to make sure we can complete the game on time. So this is about setting up your strategy for the game. Now, Peter Drucker said that what his definition of strategy is the commitment of present resources to future expectations. Another way he put it, as he said, is crawling out on the limb of a tree and sawing off the limb behind yourself. So it does involve risks, and that's what we got to take. But there's sound businessman's risk rather than rash risks. Now, I came up with my own definition of a strategy, which I thought was pretty darn good until I found it in a book about 2 years ago. And clearly what I'd done is I'd copied somebody else's stuff, which is okay as long as we just use it here in class. I can't remember who the guy was, but I think this is a very good definition. It's a comprehensive plan, and that means it covers everything, all the high spots in the company to achieve the desired long-term outcome. This is not plan of the week. This is looking something at a planning approach that'll take us out a couple of years at least, and ideally as long as maybe a whole generation. And it uses available resources, and we're going to push the envelope on that and anticipate some of our resources as we go along. But basically, it is using the resources that you have available right now. Now, Porter will tell you the strategy is developed on 3 levels. There's a corporate strategy. That's where the enterprise will go and how it'll get there. And that is something, again, that is comprehensive. It covers all aspects of the business. It is dictated by the CEO. That's his sole prerogative. Within that, though, one of the major activities under corporate strategy is competitive activity. And here we're talking about, this is what the game is about, really. But how will we interact with the marketplace to achieve the corporate strategy? How will we be able to respond when we see what the other guys are doing? And that's one of the things you'll be doing late tonight, because I know all of you will want to see what the results look like. And the whole focus of the game is on the competitive strategy. Well, in addition, there's a thing called a functional strategy, and this is where each activity center in the enterprise, which always is at least 3. At every company, there's always a marketing, finance, and operations function. In addition, there's support activities like IT, human resources, R&D, other things like that, that are of vital importance, but they're not one of the big 3. Marketing, finance, and operations you have to have. And that's probably how you either have or you will organize your individual teams, so that each of those 3 functions has one person in charge of it. And each of those functions will have its own strategy. And really, this is a written plan. Now, I'd like to have you write a written operating plan for your particular function, but I know we won't get around to that. But please do keep notes of what your decision-making thinking is, so that you can go back and review and see whether you've learned anything from the original decision time until you got the results of that decision. And always, everything you do has got to be supportive of the corporate strategy. Now, this idea of a written plan goes down to the lowest level of the organization. And as I had explained to you, when I went to work at IBM as a sales rep, they put me out in the field, and then I had to do a business plan or strategic plan for that territory that they gave me. And it was written and it was submitted to my higher ups and incorporated into their overall, eventually at a high level, to the overall corporate plan. Now, we're dealing here exclusively with competitive strategy. And here's what Porter says. And I'm going to show you something in here that I don't know that I can fully explain, but we'll try our best. He says competitive strategy is about being different. Now, the last time we looked at the idea of competing to be the best. And I tried to explain to you, and I think I did a pretty good job of showing you that it's essentially a zero-sum game, because it ultimately gets down to, in an effort to be the best, whatever best is, of price competition, which is always very destructive. So he says competitive strategy is about being different from your competitors. And you do this by either choosing to perform activities differently or perform different activities. And we're going to look at that word activities in detail in a couple of sessions from now. But it has a very specific meaning in Porter's vocabulary. What I can't identify is how performing activities differently is different from performing different activities, but we'll take a try at it. And the reason you do this is so that you can be unique. And this is the key to being successful with the strategy, is having one that works and is different from what your competitors do. And his principle is this, and to see a little star up there, it means it's important. His principle is this: we don't compete to be the best, we do compete to be unique. Now, what we're looking to have is good, sustainable, superior performance. If you, as you were reading in the Mgmt book, and I think that you've gotten that far, that was in the first 33 pages, about the bed wars, where one of the large hotel chains or motel chains decided to improve the quality of their bedding. And by putting in better mattresses, they were able to create a competitive advantage that made a better sleep for the people that came to stay there. However, it was not sustainable, because as soon as they got some success with that, everyone else copied it and put in their own better bed. And it took about 3 or 4 years for it to even out. But at the end of the time, everyone was doing the same thing with better bedding, increase their prices, but not enough probably to make a big difference in their net profit. And they were back at the same place they were, competing head to head. So what we want to do is create the kind of strategy that will allow us to sustain it over a long period of time. Now, there's another term going around that is becoming increasingly popular, and I'm not enthusiastic about it at all. And that's planning your corporation to sustain the planet, to make the planet good for our grandchildren. I think that that's something we just do naturally, and I don't think it should be a big emphasis for corporate strategy. And I'm out of step with the rest of the world. So when I am, I let you know so you can not be overcome by my personal prejudices. You got to think through things on your own. So Porter says that if you have a good competitive strategy, it will be able to be sustained over a period of time. And the key thing that will allow you to sustain it is by being consistent with what you set out as your strategy. And what that says is, if you choose to go in one direction, and I'm going to suggest one that we'll look at in a moment, if you decide to go with a low cost, low price strategy, stick with it. By working that around, you have a better chance of getting success than by starting out in that direction and then making a big switch a couple years later into a differentiated strategy. And again, we'll look at both those terms in a moment. So what we want to do is to pick a strategy and maintain the course. Keep focused, keep it simple. Now, since we are going to work to be unique, this means it doesn't have to only be one winner. And that's what I've emphasized in earlier sessions, that all of you can win with this game. I think I told you I had one team, or one industry rather, one time, where there were 10 teams, and 8 of them had results that were above 100%. And theoretically, it's 100% is about as high as you can go, but it's kind of like getting a 4.3 average when it's only a 4-point system. But I had, as I said, 8 teams finished above 100%, and it was just an excellent group. that had found unique strategies um, for each company. I might also add that when you're running, you are competing against the other teams in this industry that you're in, industry you're 100, I believe. But you're also competing with about 5,000 other teams around the world. And every week, in about 4 or 5 weeks, you'll start getting reports showing how different companies, individual companies within an industry, are ranked. And it's on the basis of those 5 characteristics that the investors are looking for: the share price, the return on investment, and the return on sales. And I had, with this one group that I did so well with, it was symptomatic of the entire 3 industries I was controlling at that time, because I usually would run 3 classes. And so I had about, let's see, about 30 teams altogether. And in one of the reports that came out, we had 43 entries in being in the top 100 out of that 5,000 teams that were out there. So it was really a spectacular setup. I'd love to see that repeated sometime. Now, Porter describes 3 generic approaches to strategy. He emphasizes 2 of them. The niche strategy is it's a possibility, but probably less likely in this game. The first is low-cost provider. The second is differentiated product. Now, low-cost provider means you work to reduce your cost and try and maintain a difference of the gross margin with that low cost versus the sale price that you have. If you've got a good low cost, you can afford to sell your product at a lower price and still make a decent margin. Differentiated products are those that are made to be different in some way, and it may cost you money. It may be all built on reputation, but we'll look at that as well. The third, with a niche focus in the game, it would be something like saying, well, we know North American consumers have a lot more money than Latin American consumers. So we'll have one strategy to service the North American consumer with a particular brand quality of product, and a different strategy to deal with Latin America, because Latin America is different. The people don't have as much money. There's a lot of people down there that need shoes. They don't have any factory. And it may be that their interest is in just getting a pair of shoes versus the American market, where you may want to have 2 or 3 pair. So that would be a way where you could have a strategy in each of those 2 markets. Now, there are a lot of different tweaks that can be made on each of these approaches. And down in the bottom here, I've put a picture, and that tells me I'm going to stop my sharing and go to you all and have you give me some of your ideas about how you're going to run your strategy tonight. Oh, and this, incidentally, is where you earn points for your grade. I'm expecting you to open your mouth and say something, even if it sounds stupid. And it probably will sound stupid, but it doesn't make any difference, because everyone will think you're incredibly smart for having the courage to open your mouth and say something. And as you do that, your confidence improves, and also your discernment as to what to say and how to think through things once you articulate them.
My strategy would probably be like, well, with the decisions I already made inside the BSG game, is to be like a low cost provider, like, try to be, price below my competition so I can get more sales and more more sales than my competitors, because I'm priced lower than them.
Yeah, and that's an excellent approach to it, and that's probably the one that most of the people will take. And I see that Omero came in while we were talking here, so good for you, Omero. You could complete the whole suite of people in the.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, good. So, and let's see. Omar, you went up in the upper left-hand corner on my screen. All of a sudden you disappeared while you were talking, but that's good. And what specific, can you think of any specific thing you're going to try and do to bring down those costs?
Probably. Well, I haven't really done much to see what's gonna reduce my cost, but probably use cheaper material.
Okay, so you could look at
Yeah,
quality, high quality materials versus low quality, and it'll show you what the impact is. If you, as you try getting a larger percentage with low quality materials, it'll show what the impact is on cost. And you can make a good quality shoe with low quality materials. And
that's true.
you can make a crappy one with high quality materials.
About
So
that
that,
balance.
okay, good. And there's a bunch of other ways you can work on it, but good. I'm glad you're thinking in that direction. Anyone else have any? I hope that somebody else has ideas as well as what they're going to do. Because you only got a couple hours left.
One of the strategies that I have been looking at is compensating our employees well and
Okay.
returning better profits by better products, keeping good people.
Okay, and that is a way you can do it. As I said, you can kick up a minimum wage job by 25 or 50 cents. And all of a sudden you get an entirely different workforce. Now, when you go, if it happens that Congress passes this law, that a national level will go from $7.50 an hour minimum to $15. I don't think we can route out that many people to improve work quality that much. But historically, when you raise minimum wages, the tendency is to get better productivity. So that's a good thing to look at and look to see what happens when you try that. And you got two different things you can do there with the people. You can work with wage, well, actually three. You can work with wages, you can work with extra training, and training is always good, and it has a decay factor, so you have to keep doing it. You know, so if you do it year one, you want to repeat and have more training in year two. And then the third thing is best practices, which is to improve the quality by copying the best practices of other companies. And so keep taking notes. I know Nicholas always has notes up there, but everyone should be taking good notes because you want to come back and be able to refer to those. All right, I'm going to go back on the screen here. So moving ahead. Porter also comments on a different strategy, and he said it's a weak strategy because it's one that leaves you very vulnerable. Now, there's a chart in the BSG game and the slides that they provide, and one that we will use later on, that shows a best cost strategy. A best cost strategy is one right in the middle. And what it does is tries to combine the production at lower cost with differentiation, making the product different and more attractive to customers at the same time. And Porter believes this is a weak position because if you are low cost and differentiated, other low cost providers who are strictly low cost are going to be able to chip away because their costs will be lower than yours. Likewise, people who are differentiated providers who are selling a product that is distinguishable and better than the typical product in some fashion, better in some way, they'll be chipping away at, because they've got superior differentiated attributes, because they put their money into differentiation and not worry so much about the lower costs. Now, in spite of the fact that this is a weak, what Porter says is a weak position, we're going to see when we get the blue ocean strategy, which will be in about week 12 or 13, that the Blue Ocean authors rely on best cost as a way to get themselves or their customers to be different or unique. Now, this is a star up there in the corner that says this is important. One thing is true about all strategic approaches is you want to give the lowest acceptable quality and performance in what your product offers. And while this goes against everything that you learned in marketing, the importance is why? Why would you want to do this? Shoot, did the wrong thing there. I've got to step out of my sharing with using the stop share key instead of doing it by just doing an exit. So what would be the reasons why? What was the question? Shoot, I got to go back online to see what my question was. You want to give the lowest possible quality at an acceptable price. Lowest acceptable quality and performance. And why would we want to do that? What's the rationale for taking that approach? You're not frozen, are you? I think you may be.
Were we talking about a strategic plan for like decision one, like making the first trial decision?
Say again. That Zoiba?
The strategic planning, are we talking about doing it for trial one?
Yeah, you have to come out. What you want to do is say, okay, we've decided that in making our decision tonight, we're going to be thinking about it in terms of a low cost, low price, or in terms of having a differentiated product. And you have to think Andre said that that you could twiddle around with. You were saying we could work around with different quality materials, right? Or was that Omar?
I think it was Omar.
Okay, Omar said that. What was your idea on that, Andre?
Better wages for the employees.
Okay, yeah. So there's two ideas that are going to improve your cost. In Andre's case, it's going to be more productivity per person because you're paying them more or training them better. And in Omar's case, it's going to be an optimum mix of good, of cheap and dear materials. But there are a whole host of other things you can do, but you have to pick, to start off, you want to pick a strategic direction. And while there are many different types, the two predominant ones are either low cost, low price, or differentiated product. So what, Zoiva, I got to get this right.
Zuiva.
Zuiva, okay. Like I said, it's a pretty name, but I just have never known anyone with that name.
Thank you.
What would you think that you're going to do? Which of those two are you likely to promote with your group?
Well, I was just thinking of just answering the question that was on the slide. I think the reason why the strategic plan to try to do the most unacceptable quality would be just to see how the people, so like your market would respond to it. So to see where you might end up rating wise, where you might end up with your inventory, because if your market or the targeted market group doesn't respond well to what you put out there in the marketplace, you would end up with a surplus of inventory. So starting off the next year, you would
Mhm.
have a lot more inventory because you weren't able to sell through it.
And so this is, I said, is the one area where you could chew up your cash quicker than any place else. And so that when you get those results as of the first round, what you want to do is get the report that I pointed to that shows the statistics for the whole industry, and go look at the column that tells you how many days inventory you have. And if you have over 10, which is where you started, if you have over 10, it means that you overproduced. Now, it may be a very small amount, and keeping it at 10 days is a really difficult task. But that would be one indicator that you're either your market accepted what you offered, or that they've got some resistance to it. That's a very good point. So pick one and stick with that one, and at least through the first two. Now you can go back after that second trial. You got 2 in a row. After that second trial is over, you can go back and reestablish what you want to do, because you're starting at ground zero again. So this does not count towards your grade. So you can take some wild decisions and not have to worry about it. But do try things, and try and learn. Keep records of what you were thinking when you put that decision in, and then go back and compare the results so that you can learn. So, okay, so let's go back. Huh?
I have a question.
Yeah, Betsy.
Okay. For the third option, for approaches to strategy, would a niche focus not be a good approach to?
Well, yeah, it's a perfectly valid approach, but it's a kind of a thing where you want to think, do I, in fact, it can be a very good approach. I can tell you that Latin America always is a wild card, because they have a depreciating currency, and that's the way it is. That the Latin American currencies are not as strong as European currencies or as American currencies, and generally the Asian currencies are pretty strong as well. So there's a currency factor there. But in addition, there is the fact that they would like to have a factory down there. They'd like to have something close by. The number of dealers you have in the 2 markets where you don't have a factory is less than the 2 locations where you do have a factory. So you start out with a better book of business in those 2 areas where you have manufacturing capability. But it's a very good way to go. And it's the kind of thing where you may not find anybody else going in that direction. So use this as a chance to learn.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we're back on the screen again. So the answer to the why is we don't want to increase cost and price and giving the customer something he doesn't need. That's the bottom line. That's why you try and give the lowest acceptable quality, but it must be acceptable quality, because people don't want to pay for any more than what they want. And I'm sure you've seen that in your own purchasing of things, that there are times when you buy something that doesn't really fit your needs, but it's the closest to what you want for a given price, or you bail out of some products because they're just too expensive, because they do too many things for you, and you really don't want to buy that much. I have a picture of a Swiss Army knife, and I'm sure you all know the Swiss Army knife has more things on it than any other pocket knife you'd have. And they have one that has 137 different tools on it. This thing's about 9 inches long. I don't know how you would get it into your pocket, but it costs $1,300, so they don't sell many. because it covers more than what the customer wants to need it for, other than to show that they've got that in their home. So we want to continually try and skinny down the product. And this is what I showed in that one slide that showed the guy scraping the bottom of his boat and taking the barnacles off. You want to offer the features that the customer wants and eliminate all others. So how does this relate to your operations and to your marketing mix? You can change what you appeal to the customers with through the marketing mix that you've got. Now, somebody mentioned very early on this evening that reducing prices increases volume, and that's true. That's a basic economic principle, that if you want to increase your sales, you can reduce your costs. Now, Porter says, look, if you're so dead set on getting more volume, cut your price in half. You get all the volume we want. You won't make any money, but you'll get all the volume you want. Also, so we want to be able to reduce prices to get more volume, but we want to be able to make sure the cost reductions keep us competitive on the bottom line. And the way you do this, the thing that you can do to give you the maximum benefit here is to operate close to capacity. So why would operating close to capacity make your position a lot better? So let me present it to you as a problem. You have a factory that'll produce 1 million pairs of shoes at full capacity, but it costs $1 million a year to run. That's just all of the things associated with the structure itself. Before you get the direct labor in there, it's $1 million a year, making 1 million pairs a year. How much overhead of that $1 million do you have to allocate to every pair? This is not a trick question.
$1?
Who's that? Oh, Suiva again?
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what it would be. Now let's take it to the next step. Supposing as a just starting up a factory, same overhead, because that is kind of a fixed cost. You only produce 100,000 pairs instead of 1 million. How much will you have to allocate per pair? How much overhead cost?
$10?
Right, twice. And that's exactly what it is. So what this gives you is if you're running close to capacity, it gives you a $9 price advantage or cost advantage over the competitor that can only produce 100,000 pairs. Now that's very dramatic. And in your case, you might be with maybe a difference of $1 or $2, but still $1 or $2 for 4 or 5 million pairs is a lot of money. So you need to be thinking about moving as close to capacity as you can. And that's where what that does is reduce the amount of overhead you have to apply. Now there's other techniques you can use, but that certainly is a very important one. So we'll go back here. So what is a low-cost provider? A low-cost provider is somebody who achieves low cost by permanent, achieves a low-cost provider. Let me start all over again. It's not merely price cutting. You have to achieve permanent lower costs. One of the ways would be through the running at close to capacity. Another thing you can do is to get the right mix between advertising and dealer support. We know that the end user likes to buy products that are advertised well. The dealer likes that, but he may prefer to have more dollars put in his pocket so he can do store displays, so he can sponsor the Little League team, so he can put a regular ad in the paper, or like Mike Lindell with the My Pillow, he could be on the TV every 15 minutes. So it's a mix in there. You've got to find out where your customers, your retail, wholesale dealers, rather, like their money coming to them. So price cuts always have to be met with cost cuts in order to maintain a margin. Now, let's take a look at some specifics that apply to the game. And there are a host of different things you can do in a low cost, low price environment, but there are certain specific ones that you can do in the game. So you can control the cost drivers, and the other thing is going to be well, we'll take a look when we get there. There's 3 or 4 items here. And we can control the cost drivers by doing things differently. And specifically, some things that you can do in the game is to take advantage of scale economies. And that part of that is high capacity utilization, as Zuiva and I have discussed, that the closer you get to full capacity, the better scale benefits you got. Now, this is always true in most every industry, that the larger the unit of the economic unit you have, the lower your cost of operations. Now, there's some people like Porter, and I think even Drucker, who would say that you can achieve scale economies at about 10% of the market, rather than owning 50 or 60% of the market. So you can get there at a fairly low level of market activity. What this allows you to do when you work at high capacity is to spread your R&D, advertising, other back office costs over more unit sales, and therefore the allocation per pair goes down. The little red stars say that this particular attribute is applicable to the game. Second thing is what they call the experience curve. And this is something that has been tested out in all kinds of different industries and hundreds of companies in those industries. And it always seems to prove true that as you double the industry volume, prices or costs tend to come down 20 to 30%. And as you then have that new base, you double your volume again, the cost will come down another 20 to 30%. And this is why I could talk to you about IBM having a $2 million computer that only a half a dozen or a dozen people could ever buy. And today, 50 years later, we have a smartphone, not an iPhone, but a smartphone that will cost you $200 and it'll have just as much power as that $2 million one. It's because of the repetitive cost drops in that experience curve. The second thing is and I'll make sure here, this was Andres, you're talking about labor saving by maybe increasing wages, but it also involves best practices and employee training. So all of these can be done in the game. Finally, you can get supply chain efficiency. And this is what, let's see, it was Betsy was talking about this, about whether you go into Latin America or not. Is that right, Betsy?
Yes, Bill, it was me.
Okay. So supply chain efficiency says, you know, if I put a factory down in Latin America, it's going to be much more efficient to reach my customers than if I have to ship them from another part of the world. And there are other things you can do. You can keep more material in the warehouse, so you can close orders very quickly or ship orders very quickly. But you have to determine, is it's cheaper to pay the storage cost or to give a little longer delivery and cut my storage costs. So you've got to determine what works for you. And then you can switch out, and this is what Omar was saying, you could use either the high cost or the low cost materials. And again, as you examine that, you have the ability to test out what will happen if I increase my percentage of low cost materials from 35% to 45%. What does it do to my overall costs, and how is it going to impact my sales and my pricing? So all of these things can be done within the game. The second approach, said the first one was, then I got to keep going back here. Controlling cost drivers. In this case, what we want to do is bypass cost producing activities that people don't want to pay for. So while the one is doing things differently, here we're doing different things. And the best example is right out of the game is direct to end user sales, where you have your internet sales. You can also relocate plants closer to, you can make your factory closer to your customers. And again, this would apply to Latin America and to Europe, Africa. If you decide you want to go into Europe, Africa, you ultimately will want to put a factory there. That's a generally higher cost market, but it's a wealthier community that can buy more shoes and pay higher prices for them. But physically being closer is going to cut your costs. Then you can go with no frills product or service, and that does not apply to the game. But again, going back to my first employer, IBM, when they initially came in the market and nobody had any idea how to make one of those machines work, they threw support to their customers for free. And that was training in their office. It was supplying systems engineers. It was helping with the programming that the customer had to do. It was giving them all the training manuals that they ever could use, and helping them in all kinds of different ways to get the customer up to speed. And the customer, they didn't charge anything extra for it, but it was all built into the base price. And that's why you got to $2 million. But as time went by and people learned how to use the product, they were able to charge for all those services and no longer give them away as part of what they call a bundled package. Finally, you can go with a limited versus a full product line. And that's, do I have 50 model styles or do I have 500? Sales always likes 500. It's much easier to sell if you got more things in your bag of tricks. Production hates 500. They always want to go with 50 because they can get better production results and lower costs by running a narrower product line. And what you got to do is figure out, where do you want to fit on that continuum? How many is the right number of model styles to offer? So low cost leadership means low overall costs, not just low manufacturing or production costs. And it definitely doesn't mean giving unsustainable discounts. So there's a couple more slides here and we'll get you out of here. In low cost, low price, you have to continue to do your advertising, your celebrity appeal, and your dealer incentives. So when we're doing cost cutting, you can't say, well, we're cutting our other costs here by 10%. Let's cut our advertising by 10%. It doesn't work that way. You've got to keep doing those support activities at full throttle. And with respect to celebrities, when you contract to use a celebrity, the year you contract with him, he's not available to go in the marketplace. It's the following year. That'll be the first year you make a payment to him. And for that payment, you want to do a lot of advertising so that everyone knows that he is your guy or your gal. So all of these things you got to do to maintain your dealer network. And as I indicated before, this is very important. You want to see how many people do we have, how many dealers are we dealing with in each market initially. And you can always go back to that by pedaling back to year 10. How many dealers did we have at that time and how many do we have now? Because you want to keep increasing that network. So your objective is to create differences in your offering that are difficult for rivals to match. And that means you got to learn how to use these advertising, celebrity, and dealer incentives, along with pricing and model styles and your SQ rating. You got to learn how to use all those to get a unique positioning where other people can't copy. So the last thing here is, what do you do with the cost savings if you bring down costs? And you've got two options. You can pass them on through to the customer with lower prices. This increases volume and it discourages competition. Now, when you do get cost reduction and you begin passing them on, what you want to do is keep part of it for yourself. So if you reduce your cost by 10%, you may want to pass on 5 or maybe 6% of that cost saving to the customer in terms of lower prices, but keep the other 4% for yourself. And what this does is it increases volume and discourages competition. Alternatively, you can say, look, I'm not going to reduce, I got to reduce my costs. I'm going to keep all of it. So don't reduce your price. And that means your volume will remain flat, but your margins per unit will increase. However, the disadvantage is it'll draw competitors. So which will you do? I'll let you think about that because we're not going to go any further tonight. I can tell you this, the last industry I was in, I was in the paper industry, and we came up about 20 years ago, came up with a new formulation for paper that allowed you to make a quality paper that could be used for the typical application with about 10% less fiber. And obviously a major cost for making paper is going to be the fiber. And you know what happened? They gave it all away. The manufacturers and the converters took all of the savings that they got in that material and passed it right on to the customers and got no leverage at all out of it. And they were just stupid. So when that happens, when you come up with a new approach that can save you some money, you want, no matter what you do, you want to keep some of it for yourself. You worked hard to earn that. So we're not going to go any further this evening, but I'll handle any questions that you've got. And if you have no questions, I'll let you all go.